welcome. So I start with just a brief introduction. So as Roxana said, I am and have been for a very long time a professor of economics for 25 years. The last 5 of those years, I started to work in the policy space about antitrust. So the Economist cover that you had, Roxana, was very apropos for me. But in the last 18 months, I'm now the chief economist, the first chief economist at Zalando. And so I'm going to talk eventually a little bit about cybercrime, but maybe first a little bit about the data economy. So I have some figures quite similar to Roxana's. This Economist cover actually is from 2010, so it's already 15 years ago. And the graph on the left was the figure from that issue. And you can see the y-axis had 2,000 exabytes, and we're now, this is from the Financial Times in September, we're now 100 times greater at 200,000 exabytes, so very similar. And so there are a few quotes here. It's the new raw material of business and economic input almost on par with capital and labor. But, and this is where I come in, which data? And how do you use it? So I'll tell a little story. This isn't in my slides. The first time I ever gave this talk, I gave it to an audience of 100 CFOs. And I asked them, how many of you think you're really exploiting your data well? You know, your company is doing a good job of taking advantage of the data you have. And how many hands do you think went up? 2. I said, okay, how many of you think you're doing okay? You know, you're getting something out of the data. You could do better, but you could clearly do worse. 15. How many of you think you aren't even scratching the surface of the value of your data? The rest. Right? So it is the new raw material of business, but it's not, in my view, yet fully exploited. It's fully exploited by some companies, the big companies that Roxana mentioned, GAFAM, and Netflix and Uber and a handful of others. But it's certainly not being exploited by businesses across the spectrum. So how might it be exploited? So I'm going to give you just a little bit, this is part of a longer talk, but I'll just give you the highlights. In my time at Zalando and talking with others like me that work in this space, I see 2 types of business problems where data or other scientific tools sometimes, but often data can be used. And there's 2 types. Problems where the future is like the past, and problems where the future is not like the past, what we call what-if or counterfactual problems. So when the future is like the past, then the method to use is often a forecasting method or a prediction method. So buying budgets, capacity planning, et cetera. And in this space, where the future is like the past, it's really the domain of data scientists, right? For me, just to be clear, data scientists are people usually with a statistics cross computer science background, though you don't have to, and they often use machine learning or AI tools. In other words, you guys, or many of you, probably. That's not my skill set. I mean, I know a little bit in that area. My skill set is actually more in what-if questions. And in my view, these are more common in business. So questions where the future is not like the past. And they typically start by something like, what would happen to our revenue, our profit, our new customer acquisition if we did a bunch of different things? Reached some agreement with a new brand, change some features of our loyalty program, change a key customer-facing algorithm. In all these problems, we can't learn from the past because we're doing something new, right? And there's many, many more. So there are thousands of these types of business problems to solve, really, for every business. By the way, my slides are available afterwards, so you can take photos, but you don't have to take photos. So, as I said, this, in my view, is the majority, and these are really causal questions because a business wants to know, what will happen to my profit if I do something? They don't want a correlation. They want, if I do X, what will Y be? And that's a causal question. And this is where economics comes in. So economics, in my view, answers causal what-if questions. Okay, how? Oh, first, what does success look like? Then we'll get to the how. So in my view, a successful answer has 3 key elements. It's the causal effect part that I just talked about. Oh. It's an impact on long-run outcomes, and these outcomes are segmented. So by customer, by product, by market, why do you segment? So because in a business, you always want to do more of what's successful and less of what isn't. So just having an average number isn't that helpful. You really want to segment. Okay, so now the how. So how do we do this? So with a three-step approach. First, experiment if you can. Right? If it's feasible and efficient, just experiment. So I often say, my first answer to the approach is experiment. My second is experiment. My third, experiment. My fourth, okay. If it doesn't work after the first three, then we have to try other things. What can we try? When experimentation is not feasible, either for data reasons, like there's just not enough power, or for business reasons, then we can use theory, applied economic theory, or econometric causal inference methods. Okay, but there's always concerns of bias in those methods. And where it's not efficient, you can still experiment and then try to learn from multiple experiments using what in economics we call structural econometric methods. Sometimes, in addition to experimentation, you need further analysis, and in settings where there are strategic responses, for example, by firms. And in this case, economics can also help by simulating economic outcomes using the experimental results as an input. Okay, so who's going to do it? You guys, right? So this is a quote that I adapted. So this is a quote from Hal Varian, the Google chief economist who started on this 20 years ago, from this 2010 Economist article, and I've tweaked it a little bit to say there's actually two kinds of professionals, the data scientist and the econometrician, to reflect the two types of business problems. And that combines the skills of a programmer, a statistician, and I don't like storyteller, because I always say we let the data tell the story. So I rather say interpreter. But there's one more problem. Okay. The people that run a business look like that. The people that make the business run, at least in the data economy, look like that. Right? Can they talk to each other? Not always. And so this is a quote from my friend Susan Athey, fabulous quote. So I'm actually going to read it out. It's from about 4 or 5 years ago. So Susan Athey is the former chief economist at Microsoft. She's now a professor of economics at Stanford Business School and a lock for a Nobel Prize. So if you're in betting markets for Nobel Prizes, put your money on her. In my experience, MBAs have a good business intuition, but can also speak the language of statisticians talently, are rock stars. Why? They know how to use data to prove a point, they present the information well, and they pull together a collection of empirical facts that all support the main conclusion. People with this set of talents are poached by other firms and quickly promoted and are the go-to people for any sort of major strategic project. These people are gold. They can talk business and they can talk statistics. My belief, sort of randomly, is that some economists have this skill set. So I have it a little bit, totally unplanned, just the way the world works, especially empirical economists. So just as one example, Amazon, 15 years ago, hired their first chief economist. He's a guy like me. He's a friend of mine, Pat Byrie. He was giving papers at a conference in academics, and all of a sudden he's working for Amazon. 15 years later, they have 500 PhD economists embedded throughout their organization, okay, working on specific, detailed business problems. And now it's not only Amazon. So this is an article from September 22. This is sort of funny. September 22, Big Tech is started. So these are PhD economists from the top 10 programs. It used to be always academics or consulting. Now Big Tech is stepping in. And why? Because of this skill set can help answer these what-if business questions. What's really funny is I started working at Zalando 6 days before this article was published. So I'm also in the set here. So why economists, why econometricians? That's not for today. If you like, I actually gave a talk on this. There's a YouTube video for the UBS Center at the University of Zurich Department of Economics where I work, so feel free, you can have a look at that. Now, what does all of that have to do with cybercrime? Yeah, not much. But I was very clear with Roxana before I agreed to present that I know very little about cybercrime. I've since spoken to our Zalando chief information science officer, so now I know a little bit about what we do. But maybe in the course of the panel, we can talk about some of these foundational questions about the value of data and how you balance innovation and consumer protection, as well as some specific features of cybercrime insurance markets. So with that, I will stop, and we will see where our panel discussion goes, and I will hand it to the next speaker, who I don't know who it is. Look at this. In order. As if we knew.